Welcome to another episode of Get It, Keep It, Multiply It. Excited to have you join us again today. I've got Natalie Gross as always, and today our special guest is Stephen Thomas. And so he is the young adult pastor at Thomas Road Baptist Church, and excited to have a good conversation today about a variety of different things. But anyways, welcome, and thanks for coming and hanging out, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and just excited to have this conversation.
Very cool. So young adults is, we talk a lot about different types of entrepreneurs and different types of businesses and all those types of things. And you and I have kind of had some interesting conversations about just people. And, I think the thing that stands out to me when we first had lunch is that you're very, and Natalie said this off air too, you're a very focused individual. And you're a people person, but not in an undisciplined manner. And I think that's very interesting because a lot of times people that say they're people persons, they just like to talk and like nobody actually listens to what they have to say. But when you speak, I seem to think that people listen. And so anyways, why don't you start by kind of giving a little backstory just so our listeners kind of understand who you are a little bit and what makes you tick. And then let's jump into that piece, which is really understanding the focus and the people and being able to speak and people actually listen.
Yeah. So a little bit of backstory on myself is grew up in India. My family are church planners and missionaries over there. So India is a country that is not anything but not a small population by any means. It's a massive population, 1.4 billion people. So then everything that we were doing from the time that I was little just included so many people. So I got to see my dad, my grandfather, the rest of my family leading out, not just in a small capacity, but also leading out to the masses. But then in that, just through observation and through having some great parents, seeing how do you focus on something big, how do you reach a lot of people, but at the same time, how do you continue to see the people that are right next to you, that are serving, the people who are consistent, and then how do you actually take them and develop them rather than just having that one-off conversation? It's like, no, like if you're interested in this, this is how you take the next steps, this is how you become a leader, and then this is how you continue to follow God in a deeper relationship. So then through that, a lot of persecution was going on in India. So then when I was about 8 or 9, we actually moved to Columbus, Georgia. My dad got thrown in jail for preaching the gospel, and he's actually still on bail to this day. So he can only come back to America 3 weeks at a time when it's court approved. But then my mom, she's actually American. She's from Maine. So my dad always jokes and says he's the Maine Indian. So he was thrown in jail, but then she was banned from India for helping my dad with preaching the gospel and everything else. So during that time, this solid family situation then turned into a broken home. My parents are still together. They have one of the strongest relationships I've ever seen because of the intentionality that my father continues to take with making sure he calls my mom every single day, making sure that he was writing us letters, making sure that he was still an active role even though he wasn't in the house. So then throughout that time, for me, it was difficult as a kid because it's like, oh, you're serving God, you're doing all these things, but now you've been taken away. So there was a point in my life that I just didn't want anything to do with God. I was still around the things. I was still in the midst of the church, but then I just knew the right answers to give you so that you wouldn't ask me another question. So it's just like, how do I best present myself so that nobody will inspect this? And then through time, God kind of broke that down, honestly, just through me reading his word. Reading his word came to the point where I realized that I am nothing without him. Any gifts or any talents or anything he's given me, if it's not for him, they're worthless. So it's just like when I made that transition then from high school to college, God that summer really got a hold of me and said, like, if you're going to do this, you do this with me. If not, man, you could be successful. You could end up doing all these amazing things, but that feeling of emptiness, of lostness, of loneliness will always be there because you're searching for something that's not me. So yeah.
Very cool.
Well, I love, and I want to bring focus back to the first part that you're talking about how to learn how to have deep, meaningful, impactful relationships with multiple people. We talked about this a little bit with John Rarick actually at the Entrepreneur Night. Just about, networking and growing your network. In this conversation, I think it's a little bit more about like relationship and mentorship, and you know, whether it's in your position where you're there to kind of be a leader, or it's in Jared's position to be like a boss. um, you know, I think even that I've had trouble with like being around a large team and having these relationships with a large team, and you know, you saying that part of the reason why you're good at that now is because you grew up around a lot of people. I'd love to hear kind of how you handle having a lot of people that you are in impactful relationships with as the young adult pastor at TRVC, who you have tons of young adults that come to your events on any given weeknight. So I'd love to hear about that, and if there are any like practical things that you could walk us through of like how to manage that.
Yeah. So I would say that the model comes from Jesus. Jesus wouldn't have had a ministry if it wouldn't have been for interruptions. So in order to have an interruption, you have to be going somewhere in the first place. Jesus was constantly on mission. He was going with his disciples. He was teaching. But then what do you see over and over again? Somebody touches him. Somebody asks him. Somebody interrupts him. Hey, this is what's going on with my family. And what does Jesus do every single time? He takes time for hurting people to be healed. So just in the application in ministry, you have to know where you're going in the first place. So where has God called you? What are you doing? What are your gifts and talents? Okay, you got to know what you're gifted in. Then how does that fit into his bigger picture? So then as you're going towards that goal, you're running with all your efforts, all your might, because of the strength that comes from him. But then in the midst of it, when we're doing these big nights and we're seeing this, so like at a worship night, got a couple hundred people there. We coming in, like my main goal that night is not to deliver a sermon. My main goal that night is to help people feel connected to the church. Why? Because in that community, in those relationships, that's where you see life change. So like the sermon is like, it's a small piece of it. And yeah, there's a lot of preparation that comes into that, but it's the conversations that happen throughout the night. So like when I'm at that night, I'm not, okay, sitting in the back room, okay, I'm just going to go up there and preach. No, like beforehand, it's like welcoming the people who are coming in, meeting with our volunteers, helping lead them out. Hey, this is our mission for tonight. Your goal is to be the love of Christ. Your goal is to help people get connected into this ministry, not because it's this ministry that matters, but because it's all Jesus. So then giving them their goals, their tasks. Hey, this is exactly what you are called to do tonight. But then in the side of that, hey, don't get so focused in on only doing this that if there's a need over here that you see, that you're like, hey, no, I can't do that because this is what I'm working on. So the biggest thing is like knowing what you're going, knowing what your responsibilities are, but then not neglecting those needs that are around you. So when it comes to those big crowd settings, it's taking time before and after to actually just talk with people and be with people. Because if not, then all we're doing is just putting on a TED Talk. All we're doing is put on a concert. And that's not what it is. Church, these worship nights, they're to lead us closer to the Holy Spirit and closer to Jesus so that we can walk out these things in obedience that he's calling us to do, but so that we don't do it alone. Because what happens when we try to do it alone, we'll convince ourselves for maybe a day or two, but then when we're actually in the community, hey man, how's that thing going? Hey, you shared this prayer request with me. What's been going on? Like, is this struggle still a struggle, or now are you kind of just falling back? So it's just that continual relationship side. So it's like, know where you're going, know where you're doing, be focused on that. But then don't be so focused that you can't see the things around you. Have peripherals, and then continually check your blind spots by talking with other people. Because when you're so focused on a goal sometimes, you don't even realize what you're not doing right because you're so focused on where you're supposed to go. So that's why it takes community. It takes other leaders around you. Hey, this is where you messed up. This is where attention's not being given. This is where we need to get better at. So I would say that it's just know where you're going, but then take the time for hurting people no matter what.
So as a leader, I mean, you talked about several different things there that are pretty impactful. But as a leader, I mean, what do you feel as though is maybe your greatest strength? And, you know, contrary to that, what do you think your biggest opportunity is? And how aware are you, and what do you do to kind of overcome that type of thing?
So I would say, honestly, the biggest strength that God's gifted me with is just helping people get connected. helping people know that they're in a place where they're welcomed, and honestly, just being an evangelist and sharing the word of God. So this past semester, we've been doing a lot of building, a lot of scaling, a lot of everything else. So a lot of my time has actually been put towards that, to where when we were sitting down, we actually had a staff meeting this morning, and like just sharing my shortcomings in this. Hey guys, I've been doing this, so the thing that I am the best at, I haven't been doing as much of. So then in that conversation for myself, again, the reason I got there is because I asked for feedback for some people. Hey, how have these things been going? What's been going on? What can I be doing better? And they were like, Steven, like, your best attribute is helping people feel welcomed. But then I was spending so much time in the office planning, building systems and everything else that I wasn't actually getting to use that gift and talent. So the best thing that I've been doing is like, hey, team, this is where I need help, so that I can get back to doing the thing that God's called me to do and he's gifted me the most in. Now, that doesn't mean I neglect those other things. That doesn't mean I don't still lead those things out, but it's just like I don't have to carry every single detail of that. Because if I'm doing that, then I'm not being the most effective leader that I can be, because then I'm sitting in an office all day rather than actually meeting up with people, discipling them, mentoring them, walking them in those next steps in this phase of being a young adult. And again, that's exactly what it is. It's a young adult. You're an adult. Like, this is the time where you start. Like, it's not the end, and it's not like, hey, this first job that I'm jumping into is the thing I'm going to do the rest of my life. But you have to start somewhere, and you have to keep going. It's okay to fail, and then when you fail, you get back up and you keep pushing forward. So just inside all that, I've always known that God's called me to ministry. I've only been in a full-time ministry role for the last year and a half. But the last year and a half wasn't the first time that I started doing ministry. So since the time I was 12, helping lead Bible studies, helping serve, helping pick up chairs, helping do worship nights, just meeting with people, hearing their stories, and then applying the scriptures that I've spent time in, that people have poured into me, helping pour back into them. So it doesn't, like, your calling or like what like you're equipped to do, you don't always get in a job title. I'm extremely blessed right now to actually be in the place where both of those things align. But for the last 10 years of my working career, it hasn't been that way. And now it is, and man, like, things are really clicking. But before, I wasn't discouraged, because before, the opportunities were always there, but it just didn't look like a title. So I think there's things that God's gifted us in that we're passionate about. And honestly, some of us may never get to hold a position to where all those things line up. Most people who work a job, they hate their job. But we're called to be faithful. We're called to continue to come in. It's like the 60-40 principle too. It's like 60% of people, like in the jobs that they do love, there's 60% of it that they love, but then there's 40% that just grinds at them, does all this other stuff. Doesn't mean you neglect that 40%. It means you put in the work there so that you can do the 60% that just brings you life and really drives you forward. So inside of all of that, what's the opportunity? The opportunity is helping young adults not become a different pod or a different section of like, hey, here's this new group of people that's just young adults and everything else. It's like, no, here's how you transition into just doing this with other people. Start having those conversations with people that are older than you. Don't just get in this like think tank of just people your own age, because what ends up happening is you guys are all looking at the problem the exact same way. What it takes is hearing from those people who have failed, hearing from those people who have already done it. But while you're asking for help, be doing something. Even if it's not the thing that you're super passionate about, like, hey, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. No, don't just sit idly by and continue to be like, hey, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? My best advice to you is just to do something. Even if it's working at McDonald's, whatever it is, work a job, do it. And then the whole time that you're doing that, ask questions. Hey, this is actually what I'm super passionate about. And this person that I know, they're a good expert in this. So then go ask them questions about like, hey, how did you start this? How did you get there? How did you take that next step? But not doing it in a way that like the entire time you're just in this weird think tank. It's like you're actually putting your efforts towards something, even though it's not the same thing. Because it's the old illustration. If you're in a car that's moving, all you have to do is just slightly move the steering wheel and you're going to change lane. You can shift direction. If you're in a car that's parked in the driveway, you have to walk out to the car, you have to get your keys, you have to start it up, you have to put it in reverse. That's so much more effort that comes into that. So I think what feeds into this for young adults is sometimes they're not doing anything. So then even the smallest things, they're a big task, because when you go from doing nothing to doing something, that's a lot of effort. But when you're already moving, when you're already going, and then those other opportunities present itself, it's just a small correction. And it takes a lot less effort. And honestly, it gives you life. And then, hey, that was the wrong correction. Then you come right back to where you were.
Yeah. I think that's such good advice for anyone who's listening that's technically a young adult. I would consider myself a young adult. I'm 24, and I've been incredibly lucky to happen upon this job with Jared, and I've been here for 3-ish years now, and I love what I do. This is always what I've been excited about and passionate about, and talking to people, doing creative stuff, all of that stuff. But I've also learned a lot about what I like to do. Like what I thought I wanted to do when I was 20 or 18 or 19 is not at all what I do now. And I see a lot of my peers even struggling with that same thing of maybe they don't have a full-time job yet. Maybe they are still in this like middle ground of, post-grad, or maybe they're still even in, getting their master's degree or doctorate or whatever. And so they're still in this limbo, and I can totally see how just freezing up could be like the easiest thing to do. And so I really love that idea of just do something, because you are passionate about something. Like everyone is passionate about one thing. We are all in Lynchburg, Virginia, of all places, and we've all found something that we're passionate about. So you don't have to be in the big city. You don't have to be somewhere where there's tons of stuff happening. I like what you're saying about just find someone who knows about what you like, or who is doing that, and start talking to people. I think that's a huge thing that it's scary at first to just kind of jump out and do that. But that's how you get opportunities, and that's how you learn from other people. If they're older than you, if they're younger than you, it doesn't matter. I think a lot of people my age too are like just so hell-bent on like the social media aspect of that, of like, it's super easy for us to connect with people online who might not be anywhere near us, but who do what we want to do. And there are positives and negatives to that, of course, but like use that as an opportunity. I mean, I can't imagine how many, people I've met on Instagram or on Twitter, TikTok, of all of these places that like are these artists that I love and that have taught me things just by watching their videos. Like it comes down to that sometimes, of I've learned stuff and I've become a better employee even in a lot of sense by watching YouTube videos. And like that sounds silly, I'm sure, to some people who are, older than me, but I have become a valuable resource to Jared by watching YouTube videos. And there's a lot out there that I would encourage anyone who's listening to this who kind of is feeling stuck, just pick something and go after it. Just like you're saying, just take that first step, because like you're saying, then you're going to be at least on the move towards something. And it is a lot easier to just pivot.
I think that's a fascinating conversation because, and I talked about this last week at the networking event that we had. And when I look at like the home runs that I've hit, they've actually been things that I did not anticipate like pursuing. And I think so often people are so like focused on the specific vision of whatever their mission is, and where they want to be. And I think, social media and so much of our culture today kind of promotes like, well, if it's not making you completely satisfied and it's not fully, you're not always passionate about it or always happy, then it must be wrong, right? And I think what you're saying is correct. Like it is such a large portion of life is never going to be that way. Most of life is pain and suffering and challenges and failures and things of that
positive.
nature. Yeah, right. Driving us way down. But I think what most people don't understand, especially young adults, at least from what I've observed, from an employee stance, is that your time and your experience as a young adult aren't really worth anything. at least to me, because you don't have much experience, and because of your experience, your time isn't really, as efficient and effective as someone that does have experience. But that doesn't mean that you don't have value. Your value is really, well, it's important to understand where your value lies, and your value lies in your energy, right? And so by being able to understand that going and working at a variety of different places and being in motion, like you're saying, is ultimately going to work towards helping you get to the end result that you may think that you want in some respects. Um, I think is such an important principle that I wish I would have understood. And I guess I was kind of fortunate that I got lucky in some respects. And like my parents just taught me to work a bunch of different jobs. But, you know, I met so many different people, different types of leaders and different types of business processes and, different types of customers throughout like my career before starting a business. And, that's so valuable to understand that like the energy that you have in your 20s and early 30s is far different than the energy you're going to have when you're later 30s, 40, 50, right? Like you just don't have the same level of energy, but at that point you're trading that energy for experience. And so by really going, instead of trying to go and say, you know what, I got to find something that's completely satisfying all of my passion, really just start using what you do have, which is your energy, to be able to start putting you in positions to come in contact with people and things that will help you ultimately refine that vision and mission that you want to be on. And you'll be surprised as to, how those things manifest themselves, because when you're telling yourself, when you're preparing your mind for this is what I want, inevitably you're going to be drawn to it. So anyways, I think that's just an interesting conversation. I didn't really have like a question attached to that, but I just, I wanted to kind of bring that full circle from my perspective as well. And I appreciate what you're saying about it. Look, I think going back to where we started, you're a very focused individual. At least that's my perception. I could be wrong, but you seem to me that you're casting a goal, you're casting a vision, a mission, whatever. Like, what's your approach? And I get that you're in ministry, right? And not to say that that's not difficult, but what you're talking about really translates to a lot of people. And I think a lot of people struggle with actually casting a vision or casting a mission, similar to the analogy you're using with Jesus, right? Like, well, how do you go about that? And then how do you not get distracted? Because that's the easy part, right? Because what you're saying about Jesus is so impactful, but he also continued forward, right? He continued to go after like the overall vision, although he would stop and, heal people and things of that nature. So how do you go about as a young leader, how do you go about deciding what the right vision is, and refining that and attacking that? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so it is a fun process and it's a continual one. So the biggest thing for me is, again, spending time just alone in solitude, not in isolation, like, hey, I'm not doing anything, but like actually just getting in a place to where there aren't any distractions. My phone isn't around me. I'm not constantly pulling it up to watch YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, whatever else, because like those things give you that like hit that you need. And then guess what? It helps you to kill time sometimes. So instead of just killing time, one thing that my dad taught me from a young age is it's okay to be bored. He actually didn't let me have a Game Boy for the longest time, and I hated him for it because I was just like, I just want to like play these games that all my friends are playing. And the only time he would ever let me touch a Game Boy was when we were on a road trip in a car. But beyond that, did not leave the car. So there was a lot of times, I think just when I was younger, where I just sat there and either thought through things or made up things or just was creative in a different way because I wasn't able to just sink into one thing. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of scary about the way video games are now. They're amazing. They're so much fun. They're so immersive that you forget anything that you're supposed to be doing. And listen, there's times where you jump in a game, have a great time, but it's just like, are you setting yourself limits and parameters on all these things? One of the greatest tools is screen time on your iPhone, honestly. Setting up limits for different things, because these things aren't bad, but it's when you start drifting, it's when you start really diving in deep and you get in those wormholes. You clicked on 20 videos on YouTube and you're like, how am I listening to the NASA conspiracy about how they didn't go on the moon? But it's put in that time to have solitude. So it's getting rid of those distractions. And then honestly, it's just like, where did I fail? Like, what didn't go well this week? Not like, hey, just like, hey, where we continue to go. It's like, no, what did I mess up on? And the way that I do that too is by continually, just honestly, like getting feedback from people who have their eyes on me in ministry. Hey, everybody's saying this is going great. What did you see that wasn't good? I need this critical feedback, because if not, then I'm just drifting towards something. Critical feedback, what it does is it's not an attack on you as a person. It's people coming in your life to help refine you back to that goal that you had in the first place. So again, solitude, time with the Lord, then that community aspect. I think a big mistake that young adults make is, let me get this right and let me get this perfect so I can present it to somebody else so they think I have everything together. And my biggest piece of advice is, if you're doing that, you're never going to talk to anybody else, because you're never going to be perfect. I'm not perfect by any means in anything that I'm doing. So what that critical feedback does is it realigns you to the mission and the goal that was set there in the first place. So again, the way the mission and the goal comes about is, what is your circumstance? What is your environment? What is the task that you're set out to do? Okay, now what are we supposed to do? All right, that's the goal. Our goal is to reach lost people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Our goal is to help people not just come to church, but to become the church. Because Jesus didn't save us so that we can attend events. He saved us so that we can become the church, the body of which he is the head of. Okay, so that's the goal. Now, what's our demographic? Now, what are the interests of people? Now, what are the things that they're missing or that they're misinformation about that we need to help in correcting and shepherding them back to the truth? So when you start identifying those factors in the problem, that's where your vision comes from. It comes from God, but it comes from you actually putting in the work and the effort to see what's happening around you. You can't just cast some lofty vision and it's like, it sounds great on paper, but if it doesn't apply to your audience, to the person who's trying to get something from you, if you're in business, if it doesn't apply to them, then what are you doing? So the thing is, are you willing to give more than you'll ever get back? For me, in ministry, you don't get to see the end product half the time. We continue to pour in, we pour in, we pour in. But the goal in that isn't so that I can reap the benefit. The goal is so that we can point people towards Jesus. And man, we may never get to see them come to Jesus in our ministry, honestly. But 10 years, 20 years down the road, maybe the Lord softened their heart for this moment, and those seeds that we got to plant here. And the seeds in the Bible, a lot of times when it's saying sow the seed, what that is the word of God. So we're not just coming in and like giving you just this practical advice. We're feeding you with the word of God, because that's what transforms people's lives, not our wisdom, not our wit, not our funniness, all this other stuff. It's him and only him. So then getting that vision by identifying your target audience, by identifying the problems that are around you, and then continually reassessing it. The vision doesn't change, but what happens sometimes is I get so focused in on this worship night or the skate night or this event that's coming up that I start drifting. So then how do I continue to have that time? I have meetings twice a week where there's a couple people that I'm like, hey, this is what happened. You were at this. Bring me back to where we're supposed to be. And then that correction happens and that guidance happens. But that feedback actually isn't from in my organization. That feedback is from external people as well. So in this, get the vision, continue to correct back to the vision, but don't get so narrow-minded that you're only looking at the people who are doing the exact same thing as you, because then they're looking at it with the same set of eyes that you are. Maybe it's from a little bit of a different vantage point, but it's when you find somebody who is not in your organization and you're presenting them the facts and you're just being honest. That's the other thing. You have to be honest. Who are you being polished for? If you're trying to present this perfect thing every single time, great. You'll get that moment. You'll get this. But at the end of the day, you're not actually going to continue to advance. One thing that's awesome is the young adults that are coming to our ministry, and the young adults that I see in Lynchburg are some of the most talented individuals I've seen. God has gifted them in so many unique and powerful ways. But what's missing is hard work. So like there are a lot of touchdowns scored. There are a lot of big things that happen, but it wasn't because of hard work. It was honestly because they were just extremely good at what they were doing. So the key to all of this, God's gifted you in something. How are you going to do it? But then it's not just, hey, what's those Instagram moments? What's that big event? What's this big thing? What does it look like when nobody's looking? When you go back and you look in the Old Testament, there's a passage that talks about Abram. God gives him that promise, hey, I'm going to make a great nation out of you. And it says he was like 86. And then it takes a break. And when it picks up again, he was 90-something. Years had passed. We have no idea what's happened in that time, but Abraham was known for his faith. So during that time, his faith didn't fail. Yeah, he had some temporary setbacks. He did mess up. But his faith in what God had promised him didn't fail, and there's nothing written about those multiple years that happened during that time after he received the promise. So the biggest thing is work hard, be faithful, do something so that when you come to those moments where maybe you can score a touchdown, where you have these big things, that's the celebration of it, but that's not the sustenance. Like, that's not the main thing. This is just the punctuation on everything that's been happening behind the scenes. So then in those moments, maybe we can reap some people, we can bring them in, but like it wasn't the event that got us there. It was the relationships built beforehand. It was the time spent in prayer. It was the time spent planning. It was the time that we were developing all this curriculum to point people back to Jesus. So then use those big things, those things that you're talented in, as a jumping point back into what the mundane is, back into what the ordinary is, because everything's not a highlight all the time. And if that's what you're looking for, you're going to search for some crazy things, and then you're going to, hey, how did I even get to this place where I'm at right now, because I'm so far from what I wanted to be. It's because you were chasing something that was meant to be a good piece of it, but not the main piece.
Well, I was just going to, sorry, not to interrupt you. We'll cut that.
You're fine.
I think that is very interesting, because one of the things that has got to be one of the biggest challenges for older business people, and I don't necessarily associate myself with older business people, but I mean, you're looking today for anybody and everybody, most business people that will come to work, right? And obviously our younger generation has plenty of opportunities out there for a variety of different, in a variety of different industries. I guess my question to you would be, you are dealing with them on a real intimate level, daily, weekly, and distractions are something that, you were just talking about, like that's why there's a ghosting mentality today, and the great, resignation and all these types of things. So what would be your advice? I mean, you've talked a little bit to young people, and you do that on a daily basis. What would be some of your advice to, business people that are looking to figure out how to connect, providing the right type of environment or ecosystem or culture for their business to better attract, and then not just attract, but then maintain and create maybe a longer relationship with some of the younger generations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think some advice to just people who are a little bit ahead of us in this season of life is just actually put in the time to have those relationships. So if you're trying to deal with a general group, and then you're trying to target that group and you're trying to get that, man, you might get a couple people to come in to your business and see this, but it's like, what were you trying to attract them with? Was it something that's actually in your mission, vision, and culture of your organization? Or is it just like, hey, this is like something we know you like? So then, hey, you might have a great welcoming environment. You might have some modern desks, some great laptops that they're looking for. But then when they get in there, if they don't fit the culture, then it's just like you've attracted them with something that wasn't the reality in the first place. So I think, again, what our generation really is looking for, and you ask anybody, is people who are authentic and people who are honest. So it's just whatever your business is, whatever platform you're in, when you're having those conversations with them, don't pretend to be something you're not. Just from the get-go, this is what we do, this is why we do it, and this is how we do it. Then, if those things align and they're like, man, this is someplace I want to work, or this is a thing that I want to get on board with, you're going to get the best employee you ever had because they knew from the beginning what it was. So it's not about the elevator pitch. It's not about like, hey, how do we do this? It's just about what is the sustenance of what you do. Because you can get people in. Listen, we do a lot of things where we get a lot of people coming in, but then when we ask them to buy into the actual product, they don't. Hey, the way we do this is through life groups. Life groups are the way that you see this modeled. Everything else, hey, but I just like the event. Does that mean we stop doing the event? No, because that's still a time where we're getting to reach those people who don't normally get involved in those other things. But that entire time, what are we trying to do? We're trying to help them to see it's not this big thing. It's this small thing. So that's what I would say is just be authentic, be just straight up front. And then from there, you're going to get the best employee because they know what they've signed up for. Then deliver. Like, don't promise them the world and tell them they're going to do all these fun things and then not let them do it. Because what I've seen over and over again with our friends is they got that big promise, they got welcomed in, they were attracted, and as soon as they got in there, none of it was a reality. So then they hated it and they left in 6 months.
Yeah. I think, and I don't know if this is just like me and the people that I'm around, but I think something too that's common with the younger age group is we just don't like to be lied to, and we kind of can see through that facade a little bit. I don't know if that's just like younger people or what that's from, but I feel like a lot of the people that I'm around at least have a really good read on people, when they first meet them. And I mean, some people don't, but I think more often than not, a lot of my friends that have been in positions where, they've been super excited about a job and then got there and it's not what it was supposed to be. They probably could have told you that they thought that might happen from the get-go. And so I do feel like as, an older business owner or just even someone who's just not technically a young adult, like you're saying, that authenticity is something that is really attractive to younger people. I think having opportunities is something that's always great. And that being laid out in the beginning of a position is always helpful. But I think in my opinion, at least, having an honest conversation with the business owner and being able to align and see their vision clearly. There are a lot of talented young adults now. And I think a lot of their mentality is, well, I can get that promotion. I can do this. I can do that because I see their vision and I know how to get them there through like my things that I'm good at. And I think that that's just a little bit unique to the younger generation. I don't see that a lot in, even people that are 10, 15 years older than me. They still have a little bit more of a traditional, like, promotional schedule in their heads. And I think a lot of younger people are just kind of off the cuff and they just are kind of crazy sometimes. And like, I want to make $100,000 and I'm 20, and that's something that sounds crazy. And I mean, but a lot of people think that nowadays, because there are so many random ways to do that. And so from a younger perspective, looking towards a business owner, I would say take advantage of that, really give them the opportunity to show themselves. And if they don't, okay, that's on them. That's their fault. But equip them with those things if you want to actually see how much they can do. Because I wouldn't be surprised if they could pull some of the stuff off. I think there's a scrappiness to young people now, because like I said earlier, there's just a lot of availability to information and technology, and that's a strength.
And then what I would say too is just put the pressure on. Like, precious things are developed under pressure. Like, diamonds happen under pressure. So it's just, where's a way that you see the young adults really working nowadays? It's through contract work. Why? Because here's this project, here's this deadline, here's these parameters. It's so clear. Here it is. So if you're a business owner and you're bringing people, you want them on your staff, maybe put them on a year contract. Maybe put them, hey, here's your 4 projects that you're going to start working on. Because again, for the young adult, when they're coming in, they want to use their gifts, they want to use their talents. They necessarily don't know where to use them yet. So if you tell them, this is what we need you for, this is what we're going towards, This is the parameters. This is the deadline. You put the pressure on. And then again, like, what's going to happen? I'm going to go to YouTube. I'm going to grab some books. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to go get a camera if I need to. Like, how am I going to do that? But then that only happens when those parameters are put there. If not, what happens is this driftingness that we're seeing from a lot of people. It's like, hey, now I have a job, but then this person's not necessarily a leader. So then they've been given so much freedom that they don't know what to do with that freedom. So instead of like taking that time to create, to really press into this, to really figure the problem out, they're like, well, like my schedule's pretty lax, so I can like go home if I want to. So again, there's nothing that's pushing them. So I think as a manager and as a boss, continue to re-push them towards your vision, but give them clear instructions on this is what we're looking for.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I don't want to keep taking the show away from
No,
Jared,
by all
but
means.
I really liked, and we're going to post it on the YouTube channel. So if you didn't get a chance to come to the entrepreneur night, don't worry, you'll be able to see it. But Jared and John actually was kind of talking about something similar to this in regard to how John runs his team, which is, pretty full of young adults. And he was saying that each of them are only allowed to have 3 goals. And they are not allowed to move on until those 3 goals are completed. And they have it on like a whiteboard or something. And they each have like a bubble next to their goal. They get to color it in when it's completed. But I really liked that because I think that ties into what you're saying about they have that pressure that if those 3 goals aren't completed, you don't get to move on, and your job might not be there if you don't complete them, too. It is a physical reminder of the goal that you are chasing, that goal that you've come up with as a team or come up with as an individual on a one-on-one. And I do think that pressure, there's a way to do it, and there's like a way to have good pressure and bad pressure, but I totally agree with you. And that really, I think, proves what an employee is going to be able to handle long-term. And to kind of be able to see that within the first year, I'm sure you would have an answer to that, but I'm sure your first year of working with someone, you can really see how they're going to come, in 10 years, or if they're going to be valuable in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, you absolutely can. I mean, it really comes down to how they gravitate to various things. Friction in particular is, I think, an important one for me, because if someone's not able to appreciate friction, then it's going to be a difficult road for them to become more than what they are today. I think also a desire to learn and grow, that's an innate or a learned behavior that, a lot of times comes from their childhood environment, similar to you were talking about, like some of the things that you were saying about your dad, about Game Boys and stuff. It's like, all right, that's checking off some boxes for me as a dad, going, okay, move in the right direction there. Right. So, cause I agree. Like, I think that, for my kids, I think they need to be bored, because I think that's where the creativity aspect, when you come against problems in life, it takes creativity. You don't have to be an artist to be creative, but all of us come in contact with real problems, and a lot of them need creative solutions. And if you don't have the ability to immerse yourself into some other way of looking at things, then you're a lot of times going to be very frustrated. So anyways, I agree with what Natalie's saying. I mean, I think you do find pretty quickly the potential and talent. Now, the challenge that I've had in my career is that I a lot of times see the potential before the individual does. And that's a whole nother element. Is sometimes you'll freak that person out. And I've done that several times, where it's like, oh no, you could absolutely be like this rock star, or you could be very successful over here. And they don't see that. And because they can't see it, therefore they kind of implode in some respects. So you got to be careful about that when you're looking at potential. I think some of the things that you guys are saying of laying out clear expectations. So if you do see the potential in somebody, then giving them the opportunity with your oversight, like careful oversight, not helicopter parenting, but really going and saying, okay, I have some barriers that this person isn't going to fall off the ledge, but I'm going to let them get pretty dang close to it, right? I think is important to helping them kind kind of become more than what they are. And look, I mean, there's so many of these things that we're talking about. You could do a whole podcast on them. I mean, honestly, and there's so much challenge to that because the person has to like have ownership of their own development. And anyways, I'm kind of getting in the weeds, but anyway, I think that's so important. It's such a great principle. It's so difficult to really, it takes time and effort. And I have never, even at this point, I think I'm pretty good at some of it, but I'm not, I still make lots of mistakes when it comes to developing people from that standpoint. But I think you do see pretty early, I talk about, and we were talking about basketball earlier, I talk because I used to coach high school basketball and baseball. And my kids are 11 and under now, so I do a little leagues type stuff, and it's always comical to me because like I've played against professional athletes, and once you see professional athletes, like there's no comparison, right? Like you just know that and so it kind of goes back to what you're saying is like when you see talent, when you see ability, when you see potential, like you just know that and then it's a matter of not messing it up if you're the one developing. And if you're the person that is talented, it's also your job not to mess it up because your ego or your pride can sometimes get in the way of that too, going, well, I got this, that's why you see a lot of professional athletes that don't end up becoming superstars because they don't have like the Kobe or MJ mentality of like, they're just pissed off, that somebody else is even in the gym, yet alone, somebody thinks that they're even close to good as them. So anyways.
The last thing that I want to say kind of on this is we're talking about the people who are hiring and the people who are recruiting in. Doug Ranlett, who's the executive pastor at Thomas Road with us, he gave us these 4 tools the other day when it came to mentoring, counseling, coaching, and consulting. There's a difference between all 4, and very few people can do all 4. So which of the 4 are you? So mentoring, he said, aims at personal growth. So when you're mentoring somebody and you're having that relationship with them, it's aiming at their personal growth. Counseling, it aims at a specific personal issue. Coaching aims at encouraging, and consulting aims at a specific problem that somebody brings to you. So there's 4 kind of different lanes in this. So as you're recruiting these people in and as you're wanting to hire them, which of the 4 are you? Because you're not all 4. And if you are, praise God, that's awesome. But which one is it that you're actually going to offer this person that's coming into your company? And then from there, continuing to do that consistently. So not saying that you're offering something that you're not, but specifically saying like, this is the way I'm going to develop you because this is how I'm gifted.
Wow, that's a great nugget. Jeez almighty. So, all right, well, let's wrap this thing up then because I got nothing better to say than that. So, I guess in order to wrap up, I mean, you obviously are working on some various things that connect young adults and seasoned adults alike. So what are some of the biggest things that you're working on right now that people can get involved in or want to find out about?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're working on right now at Thomas Road Young Adults, it'll be launching January 17th. And what it's going to look like, it's called Try a Tuesday. So Try is Thomas Road Young Adults. So every single Tuesday from January 17th until May, there will be some sort of offering for a young adult. Whether that's through prayer, whether that's through just a night of fun and fellowship, whether that's through outreach and serving or being developed. So it's like we're not just doing the same thing every single Tuesday. It's like, here's these different things that you can get involved in. Hey, and if you don't like the other things, that's okay. You can just come on that Tuesday. So the 17th of January is when this is all launching. But whether you're a young professional or a college student, there's places for both of them because it is a different phase of life. So the biggest thing for young professionals we have is a ministry called G2. And that's actually going to be on Sundays. We're going to be launching that on our Instagram, G2_LYH. And what we're doing there is we're bringing in speakers, kind of like your entrepreneur night. Like, what is it that you need help with in this transition season? And then we're giving away resources. So it's just, here's this book that's going to continue the conversation that we've already been having here tonight. And then from there, how do you actually get involved in the community as a whole rather than just sitting in your pocket? We want to equip you to launch you, not to equip to keep. Like, get what you need and then go and do it.
I think that's so awesome because, one of the things that's as you're talking through that I think a lot of times people create, boundaries for themselves because of stereotypes or whatever else. But like, what a great opportunity, whether you are a Christian or not, to be able to leverage the resources that you're really talking about, right? Because I think so often, like in a community, like we only go into a certain watering hole, if you would, and go, okay, well, I can't find what I want in this area or this, But I would encourage anybody that's listening to this to definitely, again, obviously I know what your perspective is, and you care about their eternal life as well as their worldly life. But I think it's such an important opportunity for people of all faiths and backgrounds or whatever else to be able to take advantage. And I think that's the one thing I've always loved. I mean, I've been a member of Thomas Road for a really long time. Not something that we really talk about a lot on our podcast because it's really geared towards business. But I think it's one of the impressive parts about Thomas Road is that it really is about helping people. And it doesn't matter if you believe whatever. It's about helping people. And there's so many different ways to be able to get connected. And look, the truth is, like, our world is hurting, in so many different aspects. And so anyways, that's what I would just tell people. If you're a young adult, like, you should definitely get involved in what you got going on. Just because of the couple conversations that we've had, I think would be very beneficial to anybody, because it's going to give you the opportunity to kind of find your mission, right? And I know that I know early on in life, that's one of the most difficult things. I know I struggle with that. I'm sure that a lot of other people have at times, going, I don't want to swing and fall on my face and make the wrong mistake. And you're right. Like, moving in motion is the first step. And then working to revise and refine that mission over time. It doesn't have to be immediate. It can be something where it's like, well, I want to be successful. Well, I don't even know what success means. Well, let's start moving in a direction, and I think you'll discover what success is. And I think that's what I've found over my 17 years of business. I had an initial mission and an initial thought of what success was, and that's changed several times on that journey. So, anyways. Stephen, I, as always, appreciate it. We've had a couple conversations now, and I appreciate your wisdom. I appreciate your charisma and just your intellect. I mean, you're a sharp guy, and I enjoy having conversations with thoughtful people, and that's exactly what you are. So thanks for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, it was good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Natalie, thank you for taking over the show for as much as you wanted to. But anyways. Hey, look, thanks again for joining us for Get It, Keep It, Multiply It. Check us out on our socials, subscribe, and check out Bought In and Add Logo. Thanks. See you guys.